Coming up on Arirang News, South Korean lawmakers have reached a deal to pass the government's fourth extra budget of the year, which will include economic assistance, flu shots, and eventually COVID-19 vaccines. South Korea's high schoolers and others will have to wait a little longer for their flu shots. An unknown number of doses were exposed to room temperature, so their distribution has been temporarily halted. And in a virtual address at the United Nations, President Jaein calls on countries to work together on stopping COVID-19 and ensuring that vaccines are distributed fairly. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The South Korean government has had to temporarily stop giving out free flu vaccines. When they were being distributed, a portion of the vaccines for middle and high schoolers were exposed to room temperature when a refrigerated truck's door was left open. The authorities say they'll be investigating that for about 2 weeks, but it's not clear yet when the free flu shots will resume. Jaein reports.
South Korean health authorities have put on hold the free influenza vaccination program. The main batch of vaccinations was scheduled to start this Tuesday, but there were problems with the refrigeration of the batch of vaccines for the 13 to 18 age group. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency has immediately stopped all flu shots and held a briefing to explain the situation.
There was a problem with the refrigeration temperature during the distribution. There's no problem with the vaccine. All the vaccines have passed the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety's tests, and we're starting an investigation about the distribution process.
The KDCA said that the vaccination distributed earlier this month for children under the age of 9 is deemed safe. Health authorities are working on providing free vaccinations to some 19 million people, 37% of the country's population, to prevent a double outbreak of flu and COVID-19, dubbed a twindemic. The free flu shot is available for children aged between 6 months and 18 years, pregnant women, and those aged 62 and above. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in spoke to a group of countries at the United Nations on Monday through a video conference, calling for cooperation on COVID-19 and for access to vaccines and treatments to be fair. These are the countries of MIKTA, a partnership of 5 so-called middle powers. Kim Min-ji reports.
Solidarity and cooperation is the most potent weapon to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. That's according to President Moon Jae-in via video statement as leader of the country chairing MIKTA, a middle power partnership bringing together Mexico, Indonesia, South Korea, Turkey, and Australia during a high-level meeting to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the UN on Monday. To that end, Moon proposed the need for fair access to vaccines and treatment.
백신 치료제의 공평한 접근권을 보장해야 합니다. 국제 모금을 통해 국제기구가 충분한 양의 백신을 선구매하여 개도국도 그 혜택을 받을 수 있게 해야 합니다.
Moon said this hall, which is home to the headquarters of the International Vaccine Institute, will support various activities aimed at developing and distributing affordable vaccines for developing countries. The South Korean leader also stressed the need to restore multilateralism to international order for economic recovery, reiterating his call to allow essential cross-border travel for business people. In addition, he called on the international community to participate in the Global Green New Deal, which seeks to address the climate crisis while also creating jobs. Moon also welcomed the adoption of the declaration on the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the UN.
유엔을 중심으로 코로나 위기 극복을 비롯해 기후변화 대응, 국제 평화와 안전 유지, 불평등 해소와 같은 인류 앞에 놓인 도전에 쉼없이 맞서 나갈 것입니다.
Moon added the MIKTA, as a cross-regional and innovative partnership, will also play a leading role in facilitating recovery in a way that reduces disparity and realizes an inclusive community which leaves no one behind. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's rival political parties have reached a last-minute agreement on the government's fourth extra budget of the year, worth around $6.7 billion US. The budget partially includes the contentious discounts on phone bills proposed by the ruling Democratic Party and the free flu vaccines insisted on by the opposition. Lee Kyung-eun has the details.
The National Assembly has reached a last-minute agreement to approve the government's fourth extra budget aimed at providing COVID-19 relief programs before the country's Chuseok Thanksgiving holiday. The ruling Democratic Party and main opposition People Power Party announced a finalized $6.7 billion US budget plan on Tuesday after both made concessions.
We thank the People Power Party for making efforts to swiftly pass the plan. The government will execute the projects immediately so that people can receive the assistance before Chuseok.
The 8-point scheme includes the hotly debated plan to hand out $17 US in mobile phone bill subsidies. But the scope has been reduced from everyone over 13 years old to those from 16 to 34 years old and over 65 years old. The money left over from that change will partially be used to provide free influenza vaccinations for more than 1 million disabled people and those on low incomes. Some of the budget will also be assigned to COVID-19 vaccines for roughly 20% of the country's population. The budget will also cover financial assistance for a greater number of taxi drivers and families with young children, including middle schoolers. And late-night entertainment businesses that have been hit hard by the strengthened social distancing guidelines will receive $1,700. Some of the budget will also be used to support medical staff and children in low-income brackets. When officially passed in a plenary session later on Tuesday, this will be the first time that there has been a fourth extra budget in 59 years. It would also set a record for being the fastest budget to be passed, taking just 11 days. It also marks the first time that lawmakers agree on a bill and pass it on the same day. Both parties say the swift process was possible because of bipartisan cooperation, with lawmakers putting people's lives before politics. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, as always, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a rough few weeks for stocks in the U.S. All three main indices down again on Monday. European stocks even worse off. What's the story there, and where do you see things going in the days or weeks to come?
Yes, as you said, Wall Street closed in red on Monday. And the S&P 500 linked its first 4-day losing streak since February as the investors await the fiscal uncertainties and rising COVID-19 cases in U.S. and Europe and India. If you look at the Europe, the most of the market fell more than 3%, biggest drop that we've seen in several months. Main reason for that is because maybe the economy might be closed again because of the extending COVID-19 cases. Clearly, this is putting pressures on overall market as the economic recovery might not be coming as people hope for. Also, the escalation between U.S. and China continues to happen as the Trump administration announced a ban on WeChat and TikTok, and this is definitely putting pressure. On top of this, we saw some of the news coming where the alleged laundering of the money by the commercial banks, such as JP Morgan's and Deutsche Banks and etc. And the total amount of these laundering might be quite significant, and that might result into significant penalties, and that resulted into massive decline in share prices for major financial stocks. So all this putting pressures. However, though, if you look at the NASDAQ, it recovered quite nicely from 2% plus drop to only about 0.1% drop. So clearly the overall earnings perspective and fundamentals seems to quite reasonably good for NASDAQ at this point.
Well, Korean stocks down today, too. The indices down by more than 2%. In fact, the Kospi down back below 2,400 points. Tell us about the domestic markets.
Yes, as you said, the South Korean stocks extended losses quite significantly in the last 2 days. the Kospi was down 1% and then 2.3%, and then Kosdaq was down over 2.5% for 2 days consecutively. So huge drop that we saw there. Clearly, the valuation was the major concern. If you look at the Kospi and Kosdaq, particularly the Kosdaq, the valuation expanded too quickly, and because the reason for that is because the Kosdaq is the highest rising index amongst all the countries. So I guess this is a technical correction and also the valuation concern at this point in time. Now with the news that the additional budget coming through and some of the stabilities that we see in terms of the currency-wise, we might think that the Kospi and Kosdaq has kind of bottoming out for the time being. Hopefully, though, we need to see the recovery happening, but I think that the volatility might be remaining because of the uncertainty regarding the U.S. election. We don't see what kind of conclusion will come through as the Trump and Biden seems to be kind of in a heavy fight at this point in time.
Yes, and over the past week or so, an interesting story. We've seen the Korean won strengthen against the U.S. dollar significantly. We've come from the 11.90 range down to about 11.60. What's happening with the exchange rate?
Right. With that kind of news, we saw quite resilience of the Korean equity market as the currency continued to appreciate from 11.80 level to 11.60 territories. And that resulted into some of the major stocks showing quite a resilient performance. However, starting yesterday, if you look at the overall, the dollar index, it kind of bottomed out around 92 and it jumped to close to 93.5. And we see that appreciation of Korean won seems to be kind of staggering now. And because of this, major, I guess, the outperformance kind of corrected itself and that the Korean market corrected heavily. Looking into the future in terms of whether the currency might change in the future, I doubt that is going to be the case as the currency-wise, the U.S. dollar index might stabilize around 93 to 94 range because that's what probably the Trump government wants at this point in time. The continuation of weak dollar is not necessarily positive news for the government itself. So we think that the currency might stabilize, and therefore the Korean won also will stabilize on 11.60 to 11.70 range. If that's the case, the currency is not going to be a major impact for the equity market. I think the more important factor is what's happening to the fiscal policy and monetary policy, and we think that these trends seems to be quite positive at this point in time.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
South Korea's producer prices edged up for the third consecutive month in August, led by rising prices for agricultural goods. According to the Bank of Korea, the producer price index last month rose 0.5% from the month before. The prices of meat and fish were lower, but fruits and vegetables were up 16% because of the most intense typhoon season in living memory. The prices of industrial goods also edged up 0.2% due to higher prices for fuel. On year, however, producer prices were down slightly for a sixth straight month. The Korean Thanksgiving holiday of Chuseok coming up next week is normally a time for big family get-togethers, travel, and shopping. Less so this year, though, as our Paeun-ji reports.
This woman usually heads out to the countryside to visit her grandmother and relatives, but this year, due to COVID-19, her family has decided not to go. Instead, she will buy this year's Chuseok gifts online and have them delivered.
Other than the convenience of buying what I need at home and having them delivered, I also can have the chance to be at a lower risk of contracting the disease.
More people are choosing to pre-order their gifts this year as consumers can pay in advance, then simply pick up the items at the store or have them delivered.
Pre-order sales this year have gone up 40% compared to last year.
Another Chuseok trend that has changed is the kind of gifts people are giving. Before the pandemic, fruits, meat, and traditional snacks used to be popular Chuseok presents. But this year, more people are looking for health-related products, such as ginseng for their holiday gifts. This man and his wife bought ginseng products and had them delivered straight to their relatives.
I can't go visit my relatives because of the COVID-19 outbreak, and they're also telling me not to come. But I can't go through the holiday season without sending any gifts.
COVID-19 has also created other never-before-seen Chuseok gifts. Even hand sanitizers and masks are on display for people to give to their loved ones over the holiday. This year, it turns out that not going to visit your family could be the best way to show your love during Chuseok. 배은지, Arirang News.
As part of the Moon administration's Green New Deal initiative, the government's going to double the number of innovative companies that get state support in the new energy sector. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced today that 4,000 companies in sectors such as batteries for electric cars and sustainable energy like solar and wind power will get support in R&D, marketing, as well as finance. Through the initiative, the ministry also aims to create some 60,000 jobs. Currently, there are just over 2,000 companies offering products and services in the new energy sector. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.